The agenda is set. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. It's time to talk. Make them leave or let them stay. The new face of France's immigration debate. Politics and lobbyists here in Germany. Are they writing laws by writing checks? And putting on the World Cup in Qatar. Just how high is the human cost? Well, welcome to the show, everybody. I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. My first guest just returned from Qatar. He's a journalist who wanted to report on working conditions at World Cup construction sites. That, however, got him arrested. I'm happy, of course, to be able to welcome him today on the show. Peter Giesel is with us today. Peter, you are with us. You are a free man, we can say, and you're going to tell us your story shortly. It's good to have you on the show today. My second guest always has his eye on the thousands of lobbyists who work here in Berlin. In fact, he gives tours in the city to show the public just where the lobbyist headquarters are located. I'm happy to welcome to the show Timo Lange. Timo, you're with Lobby Control. That's an initiative that pushes for more transparency in democracies such as Germany. Good to have you on the show today. And my next guest ensures that Roma from across Europe get legal advice and counsel. He is the executive director at the European Roma Rights Center in Budapest. I'm happy to welcome to the show Desideriu Gheorghe. It's good to have you on the show, Desideriu. Let me begin by getting your reaction to what France's Interior Minister said recently. He said that the majority of Roma migrants who are in France illegally will never integrate into French society. Is there a Roma problem in France?
Let me tell you that these statements are not surprising. If we look overall into the French policy towards Roma migrants in France, we can see that there's an ongoing attention from the state administration towards the Roma, and this started a few years ago with the previous administration, where Roma
under Sarkozy.
Exactly, when Roma from EU countries have been returned to the countries, to their countries of origins, and that was accompanied by high officials stating that returns and expulsions needs to start with the Roma. Now that basically pointed out a state policy which looked into pinpoint a group. That continued, unfortunately, with the current administration in France.
All right, let me just pull everybody in here for a second. Timo and Peter, do you see France, maybe even the German government, targeting the gypsies, as they're also known? Are they just an easy target when we're talking about finding people who are in the country illegally?
Well, you know, the Germans don't know enough about them. I think that's the bottom line, you know. When I grew up, we grew up with child songs. Lustig ist das Zigeunerleben. Anybody familiar with that? Which is a story about gypsies, you know, living a funny life. And it's something I just had to read out of a child's book for my own daughter, who's 4 years old. So that's basically the image of them that we have. It's not enough information, to be honest, about this.
And we had in Germany also this debate about Roma that fled from the war in Kosovo, and then they had to be returned, and the conditions in Kosovo are not so easy for Roma, and that's something the German government didn't take into account properly, I think. And I'm just wondering, how can a French minister make such a statement, never going to integrate? That's such a strong argument.
I think what is problematic here is that we have a state official which is basically reinforcing misconceptions and misperceptions about a group based on the fact that the group basically doesn't share values. Therefore, the solution is that they should be placed somewhere else, not in the society where they try to live.
Let me pick up on that. It's a good point that you make. The French are asking themselves, where in our society do the Roma belong? Do they belong, as you said, at all in France? In Paris, a group of more than 25 Roma was just convicted of forcing children to steal. Now, it was revealed that the children were stealing up to 6,000 euros a month. At the top of this network was a 66-year-old grandmother. Now, the defense attorney took an unexpected approach, arguing that the culture and the traditions of the Roma are centuries old, and one of them being survival. The implication here is that the Roma people are different. They are, you could say, the nomads of Europe. Well, that way of thinking did not help matters this month when French authorities deported a Roma family to Kosovo, including a young girl who was attending a French school.
Students turned out in more than 20 French cities last weekend to protest the deportation of a 15-year-old schoolgirl. A Roma immigrant, Leonarda Debrani, was detained by police during a school field trip and deported with her family to Kosovo. The move sparked a series of demonstrations all over the country, and some of the protests led to clashes with police. French President François Hollande quickly said Debrani could return to France to continue her studies if she wished, but that her family would not be allowed back. The Interior Minister insists France has to take a tough stance on immigration. Polls show that around 3/4 of the people in France agree. The girl has refused to leave her family behind in Kosovo. Last year, France deported over 36,000 immigrants, many of them Roma, 12% more than in 2011. So is French policy towards its Roma residents growing more inhumane?
What do you say to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to react to what you called the defense attorney strategy.
Yeah.
I would from the scratch reject such a strategy. First of all, because there's indication and there's research that criminality is not related to ethnic background. Secondly, there is no indication that the cultural element in the case of the Roma would be favorable for committing crimes. We are talking here about trafficking. You mentioned trafficking. The European Roma Rights Center had a research done in 5 countries across Europe. And what we concluded, of course, talking with the Roma, and not only with the Roma, but also with state agencies, was that the factors which are pulling, if you want, Roma into trafficking phenomenons are not related to ethnicity at all or to cultural behavior at all, but they are related to objective factors such as very low income, very low economical means to live, very low level of education, and from there, this vulnerability basically is used by others to get these people involved in.
This makes sense, but a lot of people are going to look at the demographics of Europe and they're going to ask, how did the Roma miss the education train? The Roma have been in Europe as long as anyone else has. So why is the Roma group, when you look at the numbers, sometimes you have in some states, you have 50 to 80% of the people without even a primary school education. Why?
That's a very good question.
You can't blame that on the state, can you?
We have to look in both sides. Let me tell you, first of all, that we are talking about governmental attention to the Roma communities across Europe only for recent years. So it is true, Roma are here for hundreds of years, but there was no attention given to the Roma in terms of supporting them to overcome the challenges they faced. It is only from 2001, Central Eastern European governments, they decided, okay, we have to do something. Yeah? So this, first of all, as you say, it's not a one-sided action. It is a two-sided action. So it is a shared responsibility, if you want. On one hand, it is important to say that, yes, Roma need to send their children to school, not to the street. And it is very important to have that ensured. But the Roma need also support to ensure that. If you are living in extreme poverty and you don't have support, how can you keep your child in school? If you don't have proper housing, if you live with your family, let's say 10 members in a room, would be your children able to learn and to study effectively if you don't have the means to give them the food? Would you be able to have it in school or the clothing and so on and so forth? So there's a vicious circle around this issue. So for example, when we talk about the poverty which Roma are facing, we cannot look only into one angle. Yeah? So this is not about giving financial incentives to Roma and then we solve the problem. No, it is very complex because you have to look into housing, into employment, into health services and education. So they are all combined, and that the states were not able to break and to address it through this complex way.
Well, you know, when you talk about what's going on in France right now, we hear a lot of politicians, but we hear just people in the public sphere talking about the Romas, or talking about the Gypsies. But we were talking before the show, if you were walking down the street here in Europe, would you be able to say that person is a Roma, and say that person is not a German, or that person is not French? And most people said the answer would be no. We can't tell the difference. And if you take that another step, shouldn't it make it then easier for the Roma to integrate in society? Or am I making it too easy?
As long as if it's their wish to do so, I think even in Germany they might be, and I'm talking might be, able to do so. But the impression and the image this group has, especially here in Berlin and in Germany, is a bad one. Just to put it simply as it is, you know, it's a pity, and I can hardly see any way of changing it.
Do they want to? I mean, I'm not asking you to speak for all Roma, but can you say the lion's share of people who say they are Roma want to be a part of the greater society that they are living in?
I can tell you that every Roma wants to live a decent life, and, you know, to have its family having a decent life and kids into the school. No one wants to live on streets. No one wants to live by begging and by being trafficked. That's for sure. That I can tell you.
And in Germany, we have this problem as well with other people from the Mediterranean, from the Middle East, who came here and now have to integrate in the society. And we had a big discussion going on about parallel societies. And I always felt this was also stigmatizing all sorts of groups of people, saying, okay, they don't really want to integrate, but you always have to look at the other side and ask, what are we doing as a society to give the opportunity to not discriminate ethnic groups, and I think the Roma are facing discrimination in a lot of European countries, and that's also part of the problem. If you feel the society in your country doesn't really want you, it's a really, really big step to change this and say, okay, now I'm going towards this society that obviously rejects me.
I think it's also about how open societies are to accommodate diversity. If you have a strong position which says, if you don't share our values, get out, that's not a way to accommodate diversity. That's a way to impose your own position.
And I wouldn't think Berlin, or especially Berlin, is a big city.
Berlin, you know,
But
generally.
if we're talking about Germany, you should think that this is an open-minded society, but apparently in the case of the Sinti Roma, it apparently is not. You know, there's a lot of, you know, if you have looked at about the NPD, when they did the campaigning, the far right party, they had banners out on the street saying, lieber Geld für die Oma anstatt Sinti und Roma, meaning you rather get the money to my grandma instead of the gypsies, which is a very aggressive point to make, and you know.
But you can't claim, you know, you can't say that the French are doing that. I mean, the Interior Minister has a valid point. The people that are being deported are in France illegally. These are people that are not.
From which angle we are looking at to this statement? Are we talking about non-EU citizen, EU citizens?
No, I'm talking about non-EU citizens. But also France also reserves the right for everyone in the Schengen Agreement. If you move to France after 3 months, obviously you have to be properly registered. So the state has a responsibility to enforce those laws. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Of course, I agree with this. I cannot disagree. It's about the rule of law. It is also about how you implement the rule of law and whether you consider individual cases when you implement rule of law. And I mean here exactly proportionality on implementing the law. And this case, which you just presented, also is about proportionality at the end of the day, as many other cases which are related to Roma coming from EU member states, and they are also sent back to their countries without any consideration of their individual situation. And this case also in my point of view, raises the question on how authorities are considering a particular case and whether there is a proportionality when they put the law in practice. Because in this case, what we knew is we have a family outside the EU that went through a process. The application was rejected twice, and then the order for expulsion had to be put in place.
Right.
Yeah?
And we know
but the way this order was put in place by state authorities raised the public concern.
Right.
And that was related to proportionality.
But we also know, for example, the school teacher, she also tried to intervene. She tried to stop or slow things down because she didn't want the little girl, obviously, to be traumatized. How does the Roma community get more people like you? You know, you're what the people need, but obviously there aren't enough of you.
No, absolutely. I fully get your point. This is about balancing out the negative image and the negative perception which Roma have with a positive perception and a positive picture, because, you know, the story about Roma is not about failure. It's not only about, you know, people settling nearby bridges and everything.
But for people who have always heard, you know, these stories, tell us just very briefly, what in your life, in your childhood, from your parents, what happened that allowed you, obviously, you know, to become an attorney, that didn't allow you to become what so many people think the stereotype is?
Yeah. It was my parents' will and sacrifice to have me educated. My father is a Roma musician, and he didn't want me to study music. He wanted me to study law, because he said, you have to overcome what I faced. You have to not to face the same level of discrimination which I faced. So for them, that was top priority. I go to study, I will be a lawyer, and I will have a different pattern in life, if I may say.
But becoming a lawyer didn't mean losing your sense of being a Roma.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, good. We're going to move on. We're going to go from identity to money and politics. Can you put a price on influence? Lobbyists, as we all know, attempt to do that every day. It can be something as normal as inviting a lawmaker for a cup of coffee, or it can be something anything but normal. And that brings us here to Germany. The family, which owns the luxury car maker BMW, transferred 690,000 euros to the CDU party earlier this month. The CDU party, of course, this is the party in power. It's the party of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Now, at the same time, Germany blocked an EU plan calling for tougher limits on car emissions. You probably see the connection there. While opposition parties and NGOs say that the time has come to fix a system that is supposed to regulate contributions to political parties, and they claim that the rules today allow interest groups with deep pockets to easily assume the power of policymakers.
Germany is an industrial powerhouse, and Chancellor Angela Merkel is often seen together with the heads of those industries. One example, Merkel appears to see supporting cars made in Germany as part of her role. But revelations of a 690,000 euro donation by the Quandt industrial dynasty to Merkel's party have again raised concerns of undue influence on government policy. Did the hefty donation from the family behind BMW have any bearing on environmental policy? The donation was made close to a key decision by EU environmental ministers in Luxembourg. In the debate, Germany has lobbied against tighter controls on emissions from cars. The CDU says it has been completely open, and every German political party receives similar donations. The BMW payment is listed on the Bundestag's website, along with many others. But critics and transparency watchdogs say there are still not enough controls on donations to parties in Germany.
Timo, it looks like everything's fine. The money that's given to political parties is registered. It's put up for public notice. We know where the money's coming from. So what's the problem?
Well, Angela Merkel obviously now acts like she's the chief lobbyist of the automotive industry in Germany. And it's not very easy to say, okay, she does this because of the contributions of BMW and other car manufacturers. But it always is a delicate question when money comes to politics. And the question every citizen in this country asks, or in Europe, how much influence has this money really got? How much can you influence a political decision with donations? And I think you cannot answer that very easily, because
were you convinced, though, that if the money had not come from BMW, do you think that the decision in the European Parliament or the European Commission about the car emissions rule, do you think it would have been different?
You cannot make up a link between this single donation and the policy of the German government.
That's what everyone's doing right now.
You have to look at the bigger picture and see that the car industry is one of the biggest contributors to German political parties, or the biggest, even in the long term. If you look at a couple of years, it's not the first contribution that came from this Quandt family.
Right.
And what's peculiar about this case is that the contribution was made after the election campaign, and the Quandt family said, okay, but we said to the CDU in spring already that we want to give them this campaign contribution, which it is in fact. So the CDU, they worked with this money kind of, and received it after the election, so people could not see this contribution.
It's an advance.
During
it's
the
an
election.
advance payment, though. I mean, is there any way to question or find out if BMW did get some type of benefit by promising that money so early? We're talking about transparency, right?
We're talking about transparency, and we certainly need more transparency. For example, we know that the car manufacturers and BMW themselves are lobbying quite intensely on CO2 regulations and other things, and we don't know a lot about who is lobbying here in Berlin, because we have no lobbying transparency, no mandatory lobbying transparency. That's also one issue that we need to address. Also to put this donation, this contribution into perspective. And it's a kind of a tricky question. On the one hand, you say, okay, you can't prove a direct link between this contribution and a political decision that has been made. But on the other hand, you have to say, okay, there might be influence, and how this influence exactly works out, that's something that only the CDU themselves
we're missing the obvious here. I mean,
what's the use in payments like this?
Yeah.
At a sum, in a magnitude like
exactly.
this, hundreds of thousands, if it wasn't for any kind of return. I'm not talking about a gift, but there has to be something coming back for the money.
I mean, at least what the donors expect. They want to buy influence. If they get it in the end, that's not sure. It's kind of an investment.
But it's a good investment if I give you 700,000 euros as opposed to 5,000 euros, right?
That's certainly a good investment, yeah.
I mean, would you say, I don't want to take it too political, but when you look at this, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, and the CDU, they have a price, don't they?
Well, it's journalists always want to know, can you buy a politician? But if you say, okay, you can, then that's a very serious allegation. I mean, you would say Angela Merkel, you can buy her. That's corruption. That would be.
But let me turn it around. Why aren't people angry about a car company giving that much money to a political party? I mean, that smells fishy.
It smells fishy.
Or am I the only one,
It smells
But
fishy.
People have gotten used to it, haven't they? It's been a part of Germany's political culture throughout the last decades, and that the corporate sector, and we're not only talking BMW, we're talking Mercedes, Linde, big gas production company. They've all been paying. It's something that has been not only part of the German political culture, but I think in other EU countries as well.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
As a matter of principle, for me as a citizen, I would say that that what would prevail is accountability and integrity. So I think, first of all, in a situation like this, I think someone would have to have an explanation for the public. First of all, to say, what is that about? Secondly, in terms of integrity, I think it's about the conflict of interest. Is there a conflict of interest or is not? And I think that also requires an explanation for the public, because there should be a justification in terms of weighting the public interest into a matter which is emissions, CO emissions, and a private agenda, which is a company. So how you weigh in these two interests and where a politician stands and how it balances out these two interests through incentives.
But isn't the easy solution here just to restrict the amount of contributions to something like €1,000? Wouldn't that fix the problem?
Well, it'll kill the party's operationability. You know, they wouldn't be able to do their work anymore. I think they're being financed in a part of 1/3 by the corporate sector. Is that right?
That depends on the party. If you look at
the left party does a
CDU, they get approximately 1/4 or 1/3 in contributions. The other parts are coming from the state funding for political parties and membership fees, and let's say 1/4 is what the CDU gets from contributions. If you look at the left party, they get below 1% of contributions from legal persons, so from associations and right. corporations. The Social Democrats, they got back in 2009, the last election year, 2.5% approximately from legal persons. That's a big difference for them. And if you then look at the political parties, those that almost get none contributions from companies, from associations,
are not in
they
power.
say, okay, no, they are sometimes in power. If they get into power, then they get more contributions as well. But it's very easy for them to say, okay, let's ban all those corporate contributions. But I would say, yes, it would be a good approach to say we need an upper limit to cap those donations.
Is there the willingness to do that now? You know, the German Parliament convenes this week.
Yeah, today.
And exactly. I mean, this show, it may be shown on Wednesday too, but it's happening this week.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a possible government between the CDU, the SPD, this grand coalition. If these big parties are going to be in bed together,
yeah.
is there going to be any drive whatsoever to change things?
That's a very good question. I'm hoping that the Social Democrats will be sticking to their agenda. What they said in their election campaign is we want to curb the power, the influence of lobbyists, and also we want to cap the donation to political parties. Social Democrats say 100,000 per donor per year should be enough. So
100,000 euros per person. Per year.
Person. That's still a large
amount.
Of
course, that's still politics for the the rich and glamorous.
Yeah, it is, but it is a cap, and what we need further than that is more transparency. I mean, right now we have this 50,000 threshold. Only if a single donation is larger than 50,000, it gets publicized right away.
But see,
and that is also something that the Council of Europe, the group of states against corruption, is saying to Germany, you need to do something about this. This is a problem. Okay, there are problems in other countries as well, but this group of states against corruption is now demanding from Germany, you need to change the transparency of party funding. You need to improve this. And Germany so far has refused to do this. And it's an interesting question how the next government will address those issues.
Yeah.
I think there's another question here as well. When you see these huge amounts of money, is how this money are used and for what purpose exactly? And I think for the public, there's a point here to know how are this money used as a matter of fact.
Well,
so is any possibility to track down what the political parties
I'm
doing?
I'm going to read something
this?
to you. That's a good point. All party donations are currently governed by a law that was reformed in 2011. And the law decreed that the parties decide themselves how their state contributions will be measured, and they set their own limits on donations from companies and private individuals. That means the political parties in Germany, they basically do as they please. which means either the people are incredibly trusting or incredibly naive. So what is it?
Yeah, I mean, the people, they, after each scandal that we get...
And there have been scandals in this country.
Almost every year we have some kind of fishy party funding or other type of scandal. And people lose confidence in the political elites and the political parties. And that's, I think, one reason why the participation in the election is going down continuously. Because people think, okay, if you got a lot of money, you can buy, in a broader sense, policies. If not through party donations, you can hire high public officials and employ them as a company. What we've seen recently, a member of Mr. Merkel's cabinet,
they all go into big business.
He's going to be the new chief lobbyists of Daimler, of
Anybody
Mercedes.
Remember Helmut Kohl?
Yeah.
He ruined his political legacy with this type of thing. So it's going to be staying, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Last election, we had the Liberal Party also receiving a big donation, and from a hotelier.
Everyone likes money. I think we all agree on that. Everyone likes the money. Yeah, and we probably won't see a big change anytime soon. But speaking of money, that's going to take us to the world of soccer. The Soccer World Cup in 2022 will take place in Qatar. Now, more than 1 million migrant workers have flooded into the country. They are part of the €100 billion construction boom that is underway there right now. The British newspaper The Guardian reported last month that those workers have become World Cup slaves, working and living conditions so poor that thousands are expected to die on the job before any game is played. Qatari officials have rejected these claims. We want to ask today, are those officials willing to let the truth be told?
After Qatar won its bid to host the 2022 World Cup soccer tournament, a country already in the midst of a building boom went into overdrive. But amid its race to host the sport's biggest showcase, reports suggest that Qatar's 1.2 million migrant workers are being exploited in what are at times deadly working conditions. The British newspaper The Guardian recently said that up to 200 workers may have died on building sites in the country since the beginning of last year. And workers have also complained about inhumane conditions off the job, saying they have been treated little better than slaves. The chairman of the country's official Human Rights Committee says the information is false and claims that reports of poor treatment are exaggerated. So, is the 2022 World Cup being built at the expense of the exploited?
That's the question we'd like to answer, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah, but I think we should take into account that most of the Middle East has been built on migrant workers' shoulders. There would not be any Dubai, Burj Al Arab, the tallest building in the world. There would not be any Formula One racetracks in Bahrain without Nepalese, Indian, and Bangladeshi workers. So it's been there all the time, but now, you know, the world starts to look a little closer at the problem.
You have said that you doubt that the 2022 World Cup will take place through the lens of a free press.
It will take place. I don't think they're going to push it. They might be pushing it to winter, but not losing it.
What about being reported freely and fairly?
That is not going to happen in that country. I think not from the point now. We got 9 years ahead of us. That might change, you know, the pressure that the world builds up on Qatar might change things, but right now it's not a country of free speech.
You know, you just got back from Qatar. You went over and you wanted to report and find out, you know, what's going on.
We were there on an undercover mission, obviously, because with a government-issued permission, we wouldn't have, you know, have the chance to talk to workers and human rights people on the ground there. So we went in there undercover and basically we were tracked by the state security from the first minute we got into the country. We were only shooting with a very small photo camera type of equipment, and they were tracking us all the way throughout the city.
Okay, which you can live with, but then things changed when
exactly
someone knocked at your door.
On day 2 we were in our hotel. I was taping some stand-ups on the balcony when the knock on the door, and some gentlemen introduced themselves as the Federal State Police, wanting to have a chat with us. That was the expression, and that chat turned out to be a 5-hour interrogation in the headquarters of the Federal State Police. And after taking all the memory cards from us, all our equipment, the passports naturally as well, we were then being handed over to what I understand is the State Security Police, something, you know, we over here in Germany have had our times with, bad experience with.
Did you think at this point, though, I mean, were you afraid? Did you think, okay,
yeah, when the state security took over, we know this is getting serious. I mean, I've been, you know, having my bit of talks with the police people all over the world shooting, and maybe some footage being taken away from us.
But this is all because you were shooting a stand-up on your balcony in your hotel room?
Well, the official charge wasn't even told. You know, we weren't told the official charge until late at night in one of the interrogations. One of the sheikhs mentioned that it might be sparking an upheaval. That's the expression he used. So talking to the workers would have been, you know, sparkling an upheaval down there, which is which is ridiculous. We were talking to, indeed, a couple of workers down there, getting the same stories like the journalist from The Guardian, getting the same stories of rundown accommodations down there, problems with the kafala system, which is a sponsorship system, forcing every worker to, you know, hand out his passports and basically all his rights.
So what brought the interrogation to an end? The German embassy had to get involved, right?
Well, we were put into jail. And we were held in jail for 21 hours. So a number of interrogations taking place down there in a very secret state service type of room, as far as I can recall. And just after 21 hours, Foreign Ministry, German embassy got involved and really pushed hard to get us released.
Okay, we've got some of the footage of what you shot. We want to show the viewers there, and obviously it's in German, but walk us through it.
It's the point of time when we had already been released, and the material you see here, the equipment on our hotel bed, had been given back to us. We were wondering if they had erased anything from those hard disks, and apparently this is the little plastic bag here with our memory cards in there.
Okay.
And it was a weekend. We have to take that into account.
But you look like you're, you know, you physically that you're okay.
Oh yeah, we were okay. We were treated kindly and all right, even though it was a jail, a very serious jail. But as a matter of fact, all our cards were given back to us with the footage on it. So
But they had checked what was on it, right?
Definitely checked. They even have checked they checked the photo camera itself, made some test shots in at their desks. I think they just didn't have enough time to, you know, maybe erase some of the stuff in there.
When they let you go, did they say anything?
They invited us back. They invited us to stay a couple of more days to, you know, get the real side of the story, as they put it. And, you know, I didn't refuse in the first moment. I said, well, I will be back, and maybe next time having the chance to get the really angles we want for that type of story, you know, getting into the camps of the laborers, getting onto the sites, and, you know, getting a personal impression of how they work there.
I mean, shouldn't we really be more than upset that the World Cup is taking place in a country where something like this can happen?
We should have been, to be honest, we should have been upset throughout the last couple of years. When Dubai flourished, when Bahrain had his, you know, racetrack built in there, nobody spoke up there. And right now, I think it's the highest time to do that. You know, we got 9 years ahead of us. We got Qatar won't get away with, you know, interior policies like this forever.
Yeah. I read somewhere that Qatar is a rich country, obviously, and the average income of indigenous Qataris is about $100,000 or something, and for those migrant workers, it's 2,500 or something.
Well, the migrant workers make up about 90% of the population, right?
Yeah, it's 330,000 Qataris versus 1.5 million migrant workers.
Right. So no wonder they're scared of a riot.
It's really outrageous that such a big gap between Qataris who live there, who are Qataris, and those Nepalese and Philippine migrant workers.
And that's the big point all the human rights activities people make down there and all over the world. That situation has to change, but the Qatari government won't let human rights people, you know, do their job in there.
Why do you think, though, that your material was not erased?
To be honest, it was a weekend. It was a Saturday when we got into the jail, and I think that is the very simple reason why they didn't have enough time.
They didn't have enough time.
Yes.
We also, we have a few minutes before the end of the show. What is happening right now is there are confirmed cases of construction workers dying from heat exhaustion, no access to water, but there are also examples of people not being paid, right?
That is the bigger problem from my perspective. I think that, for the Formula One racetrack and for Dubai, there has been a death toll, for every building and every building site, which is sad enough. But the biggest problem down there is the so-called kafala, the sponsoring system that exists originally to control the big amounts of workers coming in there. Like a country with 300,000 in population can't handle 1.5 million workers. Right. So they are obliged to have a sponsor taking care of them medically, legally, also taking their passports away.
Okay, but that also then makes the migrant workers indebted.
Absolutely.
Right? So this is like indentured servitude if it's not slavery.
It serves. That's the medieval term, I think.
Yeah.
And they don't try to hide it. It's an official system. Everybody talks about it. So it's nothing the Qatari government is, seems to be willing to change right now.
What about, before we wrap things up, FIFA in all of this? Why isn't FIFA saying something? Do you think they should?
There's too much political money in it, I think.
They should. I mean, I think they went down there to check if everything is all right, but they should do more. I think they should really. Yeah,
I mean, you were talking about accountability, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's needed here, and particularly because we have human rights violations, and that should trigger any international organization like FIFA to have a point and to stress that with the government to make sure that any system which is in place doesn't create dependencies and doesn't create violations of rights.
Yeah, but FIFA already has blood on its hands.
Oh, Blatter's saying, in the press conference statement, it's our responsibility to, put up a nice tournament and a safe tournament,
but
and
not
all
to
the
protect
rest.
the workers.
Exactly, and that is just a misunderstanding.
Very quickly, will you go back to Qatar?
I will. I find out more about the real truth and maybe pushing it to a little change.
All right. Well, stay safe if you do. That's going to wrap up this edition of Agenda with Brent Goff. Remember, you can contact me anytime with your thoughts on the show, and you can find me on Facebook, and you can tweet me at Brent Goff TV. You can also email us. You see the address there on the screen. And if you want to watch the show again, go to DW's website, or you can watch us on YouTube. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Join us next time when I set the agenda.